Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, college rankings have fueled an arms race that has pushed higher education astray. An article by Susan Paterno of the Washington Post. Our question from a listener is, where do bright kids like my son with ADD and a B average end up? This is going to be a two-parter with our special teammate Lisa answering the question, where do bright kids like my son with ADD and a B average end up? Our interview is with Lisa Keegan, the Vice President of Enrollment of Bucknell University, on Understanding Bucknell. And our college spotlight will be Lisa Keegan's Understanding Bucknell.
Friends, I am very excited because the sound booth is 100% done. I had it 75% done last episode, but I was all black in here. And when I recorded it with Lisa, she's like, I like it, but you're giving me the Halloween vibe. And so I lightened it up with all these bright sheets and everything. So I am very excited. So if I sound a little over caffeinated, it's because it was probably the best $600 I spent, and I'm loving it.
That's right. I logged in, I saw you, and I said, hey, I'm on with Stephen A. Smith. There's a new bed sheet in the background.
It might have been being under the sheets. All right, a couple announcements. So first of all, you guys are sending us some amazing articles, and I'll tell you what, one of the best ways we can tell if something's really resonating out there is when we get like 4 or 5 the same article 4 or 5 times in 1 week. And oftentimes we'll take that article and put it right on the podcast. And so please keep sending us articles because we don't catch everything out there. And you're our eyes and our ears, and you keep our pulse right to the ground. So keep sending us those articles. I also want to give an update on the questionnaires, the surveys. And as we said, it would get harder. You all are stepping up your game. So we had around, Dave, do you remember how many we had last week? Was it 113 or 117? Do you remember?
Not exactly, but it was over 100.
All right. Well, we're at 130 now.
Yeah.
So we had, around 15 come in this week and 20 more, and we'll hit our goal. And so keep sending them in because I cannot tell you how valuable the things are that we are learning from your input. And what I appreciate is that you guys are just being really honest with us. You're telling us what you like. You're telling us what you'd like to see changed. And you're also including some great questions in there. So actually, we're getting a lot of really good questions right off the podcast. In fact, 3 questions we're going to take on episode 195 have all come in from surveys. So on the surveys, feel free to share questions you want us to address. All right, Dave, it's our time for our missions tip. So, I participated in a counselor flying program to Smith College in the summer of 2019. There were 12 of us that came in. And one of the things they did was a recommendation workshop and a writing workshop, just from the admissions staff, really almost the whole staff was there, telling us this is what we like to see in essays and what we don't like and some of the trends we're observing. And one of the concerning trends that was pointed out by the Smith staff was this tendency for people to feel as if they have to have a very dramatic story that oftentimes is on the sad side. I remember Deanna, the director, saying, I don't know who out there is giving these kids advice that they need to have this tragedy story. But, you come out of reading all of them and, gee, goodness, you feel beaten up. And I'm observing that this year as I work with a lot of my students. And this is the idea that popped in my head. So sometimes, believe it or not, Dave, I do watch movies every now and then. I act like I don't, but I do. I just don't watch what you do. So sometimes when I'm watching a movie, I tend to like drama and thrillers, but not too gory. sometimes the protagonist looks like they're in trouble, like they might die. And my heart is pounding because you know how movies build up, like they make you like the protagonist, right? So I don't want to see the protagonist die. And then I remind myself, oh, they're not going to let the protagonist die or like get maimed or raped or something like that because you're the protagonist. And then it allows me to have a certain comfort level. Well, why don't they do that? The reason why they don't do that is because they don't want you to leave the movie sad and dejected and dispirited. And too many essays I read, like in the attempt for the person to explain the hardships they've overcome, I am leaving them feeling like I came out of the ring with Mike Tyson. Dave, is that too old of an illustration for me to use, or can I use Mike Tyson still?
I think you could do. He was resurrected after the Hangover movie. So now I think at least people under 40 know who he is.
Of course, after I bragged about my movie prowess, I'd never heard of the Hangover movie. Just put me right in my place. But the point is, make sure that your essays have an inspirational quality to them. People will get more excited about you if you inspire them than if you don't want your essay to leave the reader feeling pity for you. You want to inspire them.
Yeah, Rocky, man. It's got to be Rocky. You got to have people singing Eye of the Tiger at the end of your essay.
That's a movie I do know. Now, pound my chest on that one. When you're in Philly, you got to take everybody to Rocky scene, or everybody ran up the steps when your friends come to Philly and visit you. All right, time for the challenge. And because you've been getting them right a little bit, dynamic scoring, picking up the ante, adjusting it, making it a little harder. The word for the day is seasonals. What are seasonals?
Seasonals. Well, yeah, it's easy, It's got season. So bottom line, that means seasonals have to be something related to a particular time of year that comes around that needs to be done or evaluated. That's a seasonal.
No, sirree, Bob. A seasonal is actually kind of important for you to know. It's something that's really, really, really on the rise. So I'll explain it in the context. What happens when you go through a pandemic and your budget gets cut, or your salary gets frozen, and you're one of the hot schools in the country, so your applications are up 20 to 30%. How do you possibly manage that? Well, I'll tell you what most schools did. They either started hiring what we call seasonals, or they increased the number of seasonals that they hired. Seasonals are part-time readers that can help you make it through your admissions load. They never sit in committee. You don't have to pay them a salary. They get hourly pay, but you train them how to read a file and rate a file, and then you can at least take their rating and take it to committee with your full-time staffers. It's kind of like paying somebody a contract. You might pay someone, a lot of times they get like 25 or 30 an hour to do that. And by the way, it's a really good job for if you're really hardcore into admissions and you'd like to be, to do this kind of work. A lot of schools are increasing their seasonals. Does that make sense, Dave, or is it confusing?
That does. Okay, I'll.
And this one, can you admit you got wrong? Because you're always trying to convince me you got it right.
Well, I know last week I got the soft right. I was just giving you.
I'm talking about last week. I'm talking about
you
now.
Some grace on that one. So, okay, no problem.
All right, let's go to the big number because it is a big number indeed, and it is $1 billion. And so I tell you, this week, many of our regular listeners know I'm on a board called Go to College New York City. We had a board meeting this week. Fortunately, they're all Zoom. I don't have to fly to LaGuardia, which I hate that airport. Sorry, New Yorkers, anymore, because now they're all on Zoom. So, and there was a lot of buzz in the meeting, particularly from the admission directors. We have admissions deans and directors from Wesleyan, Haverford, and Barnard all on our board. And they're right at the start before the meeting, for those of us who got there early, like, did you hear about the $1 billion gift? Did you hear about the $1 billion gift? I'm like, no, what happened? So it broke that morning. I hadn't heard of it. So check this out. The Schuler Access Initiative made a commitment to invest $500 million. It broke about 2 days ago to increase the enrollment of both undocumented and Pell-eligible students at America's leading liberal arts colleges. And the idea is they're going to give $500 million to 25 colleges as long, and one requirement is the liberal arts college has to match their gift. And so if they're going to give you $25 million, then you need to come up with your own $25 million, and that way you get $50 million. And so far, they came out and they rolled out their first 5 schools. And those 5 schools that will be getting the money will be Carleton College, Kenyon College, Carleton in Minnesota, Kenyon in Ohio, Union in New York, Bates in Maine, and Tufts in Massachusetts. And I'm on here, with Barnard Wesleyan and Haverford, and what they said is the article, the announcement went on to say, other leading liberal arts, please apply because we're going to pick 20 more. So everybody was like, we're on it. We're on getting our petition in there to get that money. But, philanthropy inspires me, Dave. So $1 billion by the time you take the 500 million and the schools have to match it to invest in gifted and talented under-resourced students.
So who's behind this Schuler initiative? Who's the Billy? Is it just a foundation or is it?
Yep. Jack Schuler. Jack Schuler is the founder, of Schuler Educational Foundation. I should know how he made all his money, but I don't. But maybe I'll find that out and announce that another time. But I'm not sure how he made all his money, but I know that it is kind of a family foundation. His daughter's actively involved and others as well. But somehow they made a lot of money and they want to give back to needy kids who are gifted and talented. And I know the 25 schools are going to be forever grateful that they were chosen.
Fantastic.
Listen, well, we got an exciting article. I don't know if it's exciting. I'll say an important article. Take it away.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
All right. Yes. And this is going to actually tread on some old ground that we have talked about in the past and give it a little bit of a new spin. College rankings have fueled an arms race that has pushed higher education astray. There's a great article by Susan Paterno of the Washington Post, in which she alleges that the college's focus on rising in the rankings has come at the expense of innovation and affordability. So first she gives a little background. U.S. News first published its first rankings in 1983, and Paterno alleges that, quote, these were perfectly timed to exploit a political and cultural shift that glorified markets and encouraged materialism, all while inflaming economic anxiety. So first there was a lot of pushback by a lot of the educators because they felt that these rankings were completely superficial. They were based on surveys of deans that knew nothing about each other's colleges, and they didn't really get into true academic quality, value, or learning. But this initial pushback turned out to be no avail. These college rankings first became widely adopted by upper-class parents who used tutors and consultants to then get their kids into these high-priced colleges, usually the top 100. But the rankings completely exploded with the advent of the internet when they went online in 1993, where the greater accessibility of the rankings combined with skyrocketing tuition costs made rankings more important to families as they sought to calculate the exact return of investment on a college education. They highlighted two schools that we have talked about, Mark. USC, who spent $100 million getting improved salaries, resources, merit scholarships into their university system, and they moved up 29 spots to 24 this year. And Northeastern, which you have done a college spotlight, Mark, which went from being a commuter school with more working class kids to being one that enrolled more affluent, higher achieving suburban students with discounted tuition to desired merit high achieving students. And they went from ranking 162 just 10, 15 years ago to a now ranking of 49th. But the problem is, according to Paterno, that the focus on boosting school rankings has come at the expense of finding ways to offer more affordable and higher value degrees. And the result is that ever-increasing tuition, piles of student debt, and colleges and universities without massive endowments struggling to survive. So let me stop here and throw it open to you, Mark, and see where you want to take this article.
In summary, as always, my friend. So I want to start with an anecdote. It's a true story. Actually, It's 13 hours old. 13 hours old story. So Dave and I are recording this at 9 a.m. Eastern time, and 8 p.m. last night I had a session. The family in Florida. It's what I call a list rollout session. It's where I take all the information I've gathered from my questionnaire and all the academic records, everything I've gathered from the family studies and surveys, and I come in, I present to them the colleges that I think best match up with what they're looking for. But before I had the list rollout, four times, either in my pre-meeting or through email, through text, the mom had said, I sure hope Elon is going to be on this list. And so finally, after the second time, I said, I didn't use the word obsession, but I'll say it with you. Help me understand what the Elon obsession is. Like I said, I didn't use the word obsession, but the fixation with Elon. And so she said, well, it's the number one ranked school in U.S. News and World Report for undergraduate teaching. And so before I did the list rollout, I said to her, I'm not going to mention her name. I said, Mom, I'm going to tell you something, and I hope you'll listen to me. I said, I'm going to use an example with you. And, a lot of times, Dave, that an emotional argument is more powerful than a logical argument. So what I said, suppose you went on the internet and you wanted to research what the number one ranked shoe is out there in the country. And let's say you found a shoe and it was $2,500. I mean, this thing was gold-plated, star-studded, every imaginable thing you could want for the arch of the shoe and everything. And so you're like, you know what? I'm doing pretty well financially. I'm going to buy this shoe because shoes are important. And she's paid the $2,500 to buy this number one ranked shoe. And then I said, well, what would happen if you spent all that and then the shoe gave you ingrown nails, blisters, bunions, heel pain, athlete's foot, and hammer toe?
Dang.
I didn't draw all that from my head. I did research on the 6 most common problems that happen when you have shoes that don't fit. So that's what I came from. I just pulled that from my head, everybody.
The first 5 you can deal with, but hammer toe, that's bad. You threw the hammer toe down on it.
I did throw the hammer toe on it. I said, the point is, if all you want to do is have me give you the best ranked shoes, my shoes are on my mind, the best ranked schools, you really didn't need to hire me. I said, I'm like the tailor who took custom measurements of all of your feet, and now I'm going to deliver you a custom list of schools that match up. And so I said, I hope that you will just be open to what I have to say. And she was fantastic. She was great. She listened to me. But that's what the rankings do. Look, most of the schools that are ranked high are good schools. I would never deny that they're not good schools. The problem is, are they good school for your child? And if you look at the history of the rankings, before 1983, it was considered just an issue dead on arrival. You would never rank schools. Why would you rank schools? Because how can you possibly do that? Because there's so many different people out there. It'd be like ranking churches. We don't see rankings of churches. Why would we rank schools? But actually what happened was the rankings emerged at a very, very interesting time. It was a time when consumerism was just rife. And Consumer Reports was, everybody had to have Consumer Reports to figure out, like, what's the best fridge to buy, the best car to buy, this, that, the other. So you have Consumer Reports, and U.S. News made the leap. And what at the time was a very, very bold move. They said, well, why don't we try ranking colleges? Colleges were never thought of as a commodity. But with the rankings came the commoditization of the colleges. Well, not only did it catch on, literally over half the revenue came in from that particular issue, and the rest is history. And it's just taken off. And if you've been a regular listener of our podcast, you will remember we've had 3 different VP of Enrollments on. Lisa Keegan, who currently is on, an episode or 2 ago. I think it was last episode, actually. Courtney Minden, who was maybe on at Babson, was on maybe about 3 months ago. And Peter Van Buskirk, who was on about 2.5 years ago. All of them alluded to the fact that they know that people in high places are watching the rankings. VP of Enrollments are different than just Director of Admissions. They're not just involved in bringing in the undergraduate class. They have to see the whole big picture. They're responsible for the grad school admissions, med school admissions, transfer admissions, and they are oftentimes talking directly to the president, the provost, or the board members. and they know that they're getting pressure to what's the ranking going to be this year. Some of you may remember Courtney was very humorous talking about Babson, which had been ranked #1 school for entrepreneurship 26 years in a row by U.S. News. And she said, "Do you know the pressure that is in our office every time the rankings are coming out? Our heart is beating. We don't want to be on our watch that we're not #1 anymore." So schools feel this pressure. About 8 years ago, I worked with a family, and the mom was on a board of trustees at a school that I can't mention because it's confidential, but it's one of those brand names that everybody would know it if I said it. And she would talk to me about how at board meetings, they would frequently talk about the ranking of the school and what can be done to improve our ranking. Why? Because the higher your ranking is, the more applications you get, the lower your acceptance rate is, the public likes scarcity, and then the alumni will be happy. They'll open up their coffers and give more money. Your yield will increase because people will feel so much honor is conferred on them that they got in this school that so few people got in. And that's how all of higher ed has come to build their brand. One of the reasons so many educators are so apoplectic about U.S. News and World Report, and there's a lot of disdain and contempt out there for Robert Morris, who's their chief data analyst, the number cruncher behind all the rankings at U.S. News, is because the rankings have so much power that they are leading schools to do things that often decreases their educational quality. For example, if you want to move up the rankings, it's been proven. Admit more wealthy kids. Admit more kids who come from homes where parents graduate. So this causes schools to shift money away from under-resourced kids and need-based aid and increase merit scholarships, often to people who don't need the money. It's been a proven way to increase your move in the rankings with U.S. News formula, and it's something that educators have great contempt for. And I remember another family I was talking with, it's a family I'm actually working with right now, and I'd recommended Northeastern to them. And they said, Mark, I just don't know how I feel about Northeastern. Isn't that the school that gamed the rankings? And my response was, everybody tries to game the rankings. They just were successful where other people haven't been. And so now this is the game that's played in higher education. If people knew the extent to which crazy things happen, for example, originally when U.S. News had their rankings, Dave, they never revealed the formula. They never shared the formula, but there's so much backlash. Well, how are you coming up with these numbers? You're just pulling them out of a hat? So they eventually released the formula. And then once they released the formula, everybody started studying the formula. And one of the big things of the U.S. News initially, really, almost the entirety of the rankings were based on peer assessment. So they'd ask the president, the provost, and the dean of admissions to rank what they thought their peers or their competitors should get on a scale of 1 to 5. Which was really a bunch of malarkey. Like, how well do you know these other schools? You know your own school. You don't know these other schools. Eventually, that decreased in its significance. But even to this day, that's a huge part of the U.S. News rankings, making it different than the competitors out there. And so what that led to crazy stuff. Literally, schools would go on campaigns. They'd have marketing materials developed that they would send not to students, but to their peer institutions, to the provost, presidents, and deans, so that they would have heard of their school, so that when they go in, they'll give them a 5 or a 4 and not a 1, 2, or 3. So that's the craziness that's kind of happened out there. And what I want people to understand, not only does the shoe have to fit for you? It's not about how good the shoe is. Does the shoe have to fit for you? But I also want people to understand just how completely subjective these rankings are. They're subjective in terms of they're based on a formula. They're based on criteria, right? And they can vary so much from one school to one set of rankings to another. So one of the things that's happened in the last 30 years is after so many people railing against the rankings, so many other people decide to jump in the game. They said, you know what? It's very profitable. It's selling lots of magazines or newspapers. So now there's more than 20 competitors out there. Most, by the way, are much better than U.S. News. A lot of them have educators involved in their assessment. One is Washington Monthly. Washington Monthly, and they explicitly say, they came out in 2005, and they say, we are an alternative to U.S. News. U.S. News primarily measures wealth, prestige, and resources. And that's primarily what it measures. And they say we are going to measure 3 different things. So they measure, in their opinion, how much your school helps the common good. So they look at things like, are you enrolling large numbers of Pell Grant students? And are you moving them along to graduation, showing that you're elevating society by moving people up the economic spectrum? Are you investing in research? Are you getting research grants? They say research is something that helps the human good. And thirdly, to what degree are your students involved in service and public service and types of service? And so they're basically measuring. I mean, they have other metrics they look at as well. Like won't get into all of them. You can look up the Washington Monthly Formula. So when you look at their rankings, number 1 is Stanford. You say, okay, well, how different is that than U.S. News? Number 2 is MIT. How different is that? Number 3 is Duke. You say, how different is that? That's when it starts to change. Sorry, Dave. Hate to bruise your little Princeton ego, your little Yale ego there. But Princeton and Yale come in 18th and 19th. Guess who comes in number 4 and 8? Wisconsin-Madison.
Yeah.
Wisconsin-Madison 4. And your flagship in Illinois, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
I can see that. Great schools with great engineering programs with a wide diversity at a reasonable rate. So I see that.
Yeah, and the UCs, all of them are very, very high, from Davis to Irvine to San Diego. San Diego came in number 12, Berkeley 10, and there's so many different rankings than you see with U.S. News, just because you're using different criteria. So those are some of my thoughts, Dave. What anything I said you want to comment on, or anything else on your mind?
No, I agree with that. And you had directed me to a great Malcolm Gladwell podcast talking about this with Dillard. What is his podcast called again? I'm sorry, I didn't take my Prevagen this morning. But the bottom line,
Dave, I'm gonna give it to you right now. I think it's called Revisionist History.
Yeah, that's right.
Revisionist history. Yeah.
Yes. Many of these points were really wonderfully illustrated by Revisionist History podcast by Malcolm Gladwell, where he describes 2 particular schools. He actually has a group of MIT graduates who were able to suss out the U.S. News data, and by just making a few differences in the types of students, they were able to radically change their rankings. So a great podcast if you want to see how the sausage is made, and to Mark's point, how completely arbitrary these rankings are and how they totally skew to wealth and privilege and not to actual intellectual achievement potential or social benefits to society. It's a great podcast. So I do want to make a point too, that I thought that the articles focused on Northeastern and USC weren't the best examples, because particularly in Northeastern, that's a school that actually made some really great changes. We mentioned that on our college spotlight, in terms of their internships, in terms of increasing the value of the education. So Northeastern was one school that probably really did deserve to rise in the rankings. I think a much more egregious example is like the University of Chicago, which used to have acceptance rates of like 70%, because people it was very specific in how it marketed to the students it wanted, but then literally just changed its criteria to accept thousands and thousands of more applicants that they knew that they would reject, simply because they knew that one of the criteria to rise in the rankings was to reject a whole lot of people, even if those rejections did not result in a significant improvement in your student body. Do you want to say something about that, Mark?
Well, what I want to say is a point that you brought up, which is really important. So when a school goes up in the rankings, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are not doing some things to improve their quality. And it doesn't, and also some of the things that are measured by the rankings are very good things, right? So for example, if you improve your graduation rates, things like that, you're going to notice an improvement in the rankings and increased retention. It depends on the school, on the formula. There's so many different formulas that are out there, but I don't want to imply that schools that make improvements in their rankings are not doing some good things. Northeastern is a good example. Northeastern basically transformed itself from a commuter school to more of a residential school. And they definitely increased the generosity of their financial aid so that they moved from a school that didn't meet financial need to a school that meets full demonstrated need, which I have a problem with that term, but it is better to meet it than not meet it. Okay. It's better to meet full demonstrated need, even that it's defined by the institution, not the family. And most people laugh at what they think schools feel you can pay because it's a joke. It's still better to meet it than not meet it. It means that you are increasing your financial aid. So, I don't want to imply that every single time a school has a rankings improvement, that absolutely means nothing. What I'm trying to encourage people to realize is, one, it's impossible for an organization to know what the needs of your child are. You have to be the one to go through that process. Also, there's a huge financial incentive, Dave, for the rankings to change every year. Why did they change every single? Well, I'm talking about the formula. The formula changes every single year. And the reason for that is you got to sell magazines. If you just came out and said we never made any changes, then how would you market the 2022 edition? So there is a crass component of marketing behind this. And so it's just important that you know that. And the reason why I say this, and I'm harping on this, it's my experience that the average person, when you start railing about the rankings, this is almost how they feel. Well, maybe it's just kind of sour grapes on your part because, maybe it's a bruised ego. Maybe your school didn't do as well as maybe you'd hoped. Listen, everybody's going to tell you they're great. Of course, they're going to tell you they're great if you go to an information session. So we need outside objective views that are not giving you the bias spin from the schools themselves. And what better way than to have someone that's come up with some systematic thing? What they're often naive about is when they run those numbers. This is particularly true for U.S. News. There have been some people that have come out that worked there that have come out and spoken to reporters. If they were to run those numbers, Dave, and it was to come out, I'm just making this up, and said like the University of Dayton was the number one school, they would not run with that. They would say, that's not going to work. We need to go change it to make certain schools be at the top. And I think that is something that's not known. So what should be the takeaways for our families?
Takeaways from the families is put rankings in perspective. They have a role, but it is extremely limited, and that nothing can substitute for choosing the school for your child, like doing an in-depth study of what your child wants and the institution that you're looking at offers.
And the role that I say they have is that the role is not in the composite rankings. The role is looking at the data collection in an individual area that may be important to you. So, for example, let's say you want to go to a school that has a lot of socioeconomic diversity. Well, then you can take a look at, for example, at the Pell Grant numbers and see, okay, is this a school that's got all rich kids or is the full spectrum represented? And if that's something that's important to you, then you can factor that in. And quite honestly, the opposite is true. If you don't want to be around under-resourced or modestly resourced kids, then you can factor that in as well. Right? So it's more about you taking the individual metrics and applying them to your own situation, but not assuming that number 4 is better than number 44, because with just one little switch of a data point, those numbers can be completely reversed.
And I just want to end on the fact that these rankings have absolutely no bearing on your future success or the opportunities that you will have later on in life once you graduate. For that, we will reference Frank Bruni, an author that we've talked about many times.
Well, and the other thing that I would say is, while a lot of times schools that are ranked really high are highly respected by employers, it is not one for one. If you talk to employers when they recruit, and this can vary, of course, by major. That's the other thing. The rankings don't take into consideration how good a school is in your field of study, right? They're just composite rankings. And so a lot of times what individual employers, the schools that they recruit from, you would be surprised at some of the schools that are not way up in the rankings that individual recruiters have an incredible track record with and they value. And so it is not a one for one to think that top ranked schools is the exact same that employers view as their top ranked schools. Theirs is based a lot more on their experience with graduates and how graduates have done when they've come into their workforce. And there are always these hidden jewels that are incredibly valued by employers. Oftentimes because the school has developed an incredible program in a particular area. So just keep that in mind as well. And I know Dave and I, we've kind of beat this drum, a lot in the past, but the rankings so impact how people think that I almost think we need to come back to this at least once or twice a year, Dave.
I think so. I absolutely think so.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Friends, I'm here with Lisa. How you doing, Lisa?
I'm doing real good, Mark. How are you?
Good, good, good. I appreciate what you said last week about women's colleges. We had several people respond about that. I could tell that was really heartfelt and you just coming from the heart there. I think a lot of people are like, you're so successful. How could you feel your life could be any different? But I know you shared what you were just thinking. So I appreciate your parent bearing your soul with that.
Well, yeah, you never know what could have been sometimes or what opportunities.
Sure.
I mean, I probably would have ended up maybe at the same place I am now, but maybe just less annoyed. I don't know. But
less annoyed by men that interrupted you in college.
That's right. I hold a grudge against those guys too.
A 30 to 35
That's right.
grudge.
And it's not going away anytime soon. And you know who you are.
With that, we're going to transition. We're going to go back to we're in the top 50 now. We're counting down the 50 schools with the largest endowments. Of course, I've mentioned endowments oftentimes are a reflection of a school's ability to do certain things like pay faculty more, have smaller classes, smaller teacher-faculty ratios, have larger amounts of financial aid, and oftentimes you'll see a correlation with facilities. So we've got 10 more. We're in the top 50. Some of these are very small this week, but they all have over 400,000 per student. So we've got the Jewish Theological Seminary of America at 50. In 49th place, Reed College, Portland, Oregon. In 48th place, Cody College in Nevada, Missouri. Now, Lisa and I both had to look this one up. 350 students, so it's very small. What can you tell us about the location, Lisa, in Nevada, Missouri? You're from Missouri.
Right. Well, Cody College is in a small town in Nevada, which is just north of Joplin, Missouri, south of Kansas City, and right by the Kansas border. And I never got around there during my time in Missouri, but I'm sure it's great.
There you go. In 47th place, we've got Brown University, Providence, Rhode Island. In 46th place, Earlham College, Richmond, Indiana. And then in 45th place, Northwestern University, your alma mater. So do you claim Northwestern or not, Lisa?
Well, I did spend 5 years there. I guess I just felt kind
That's
of
a lot.
Disconnected from it because I was always downtown at the hospital campus. And so I never really spent a lot of time on the actual campus of Northwestern University. In fact, I was graduating and I asked somebody where the student union was so I could pick up my cap and gown. He's just looked at me and said, well, how can you be graduating if you don't know where the union is? So that was kind of my thing with Northwestern.
I will never forget that.
It's a fantastic school. It's beautiful. Everyone loves it. It's great.
It's just so funny. 5 years and where's the student union? That really made your point that you were at the downtown campus.
Right.
Very loud and clear. In 44th place, we go back to Missouri University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy, another specialized school. This is right in St. Louis, of course. And 43rd, a place close to my heart, Davidson College, Davidson, North Carolina. 42nd place, Hillsdale College. School we've done a spotlight on, Hillsdale, Michigan. 41st, Carleton College, Northfield, Minnesota. And in 40th place, now we went over the $450,000 per student, Vassar College, Poughkeepsie, New York. One of the one of the former Seven Sisters schools, the only one that flipped and went co-ed. So Vassar College. So there we go. Now we're down to the top 39. Stay tuned.
Wow.
So friends, we're reversing roles this week because when we get a question that comes in that is right up Lisa's alley, then she's definitely going to be the lead on it. And that's definitely the case this week. And so I'm going to read the question and we're going to let Lisa answer it. So, and this is a question that comes in from Christina. I'm not going to say her state because she does get a little personal. I doubt her son is listening, but just in case there's any wild chance, which is like 0.00000000001, I'm still just going to play it safe and just leave the state off. But here's what Christina says. My very bright son with inattentive ADD declared in 9th grade that he was going to be a B student. Anything higher wasn't worth the extra effort for him. He has high intellectual curiosity, he's very bright, and the structure of school isn't his jam. It seems to me he puts more energy into managing to get a B than he would simply doing the work and getting an A, which quite honestly would be very easy for him. Where do kids like that end up? So first of all, Lisa, you will never say this, but I'm going to set you up because you're so humble. Let our listeners know a little bit about your sort of background when it comes to ADD, ADHD, that sort of thing, because I think that would be helpful, and then I'll let you answer it.
Sure. Well, over the course of time working with adults, I began to notice clients who really seemed like they were having difficulty concentrating and getting things done, but they weren't diagnosed with ADD as children. So I started learning more about it, and I went and I got my certification in ADD, which was enormously helpful and really helped me to understand a lot more about what my clients were struggling with. And so I've worked with many clients, adult and adolescent, who have ADD. And honestly, it's been a privilege because I think most people with ADD are just incredibly smart, talented, funny people. Like it goes along somehow with the ADD. And so it's always been a lot of fun to do that. But I just want to say to Christina, I feel your pain because my oldest daughter sort of falls along these lines. And so I know where you're coming from, but I don't think it's as bad as you think. And I'm going to explain a couple things. And the one thing I really wanted to talk about today, is about the neural load that ADD causes for kids. Because I think people think it's kind of a choice. Why can't you just pay attention? Why can't you just, write the paper, sit down? And I'm just going to try to explain why that's so hard. The thing that we have learned over time is that ADD is a developmental neurological disorder of the brain. It's considered a developmental delay in children, and it's basically a disorder of inhibition. So what the disorder is you can't inhibit your brain from going off and doing something else more interesting when it's forced to do something less interesting. So that's a simple thing, but it's a big problem. So kids like that, if school isn't compelling to them in the moment, their brain really can't stop itself from going off and looking at something shiny and pretty on the other side of the room. And so therefore, for kids to concentrate who have this, it takes so much mental energy. And that's this mental load that I'm talking about. So imagine, let's say you're trying to watch the news and there's some really important story on, but your house is like total chaos. Like your dog's barking and the kids keep jumping in front of the TV, they're screaming, and maybe sirens go by, but you're making this huge effort to listen because you really need to know what they're saying. And after you do that, let's say it all quiets down, you feel exhausted, you feel mentally tired. And that's every day for a kid with ADD, particularly an unmedicated kid with ADD. So that's one thing that makes it really hard for kids to pay attention. And I don't think they're making it up. I think it just takes so much more mental effort for them. Also, the other thing that ADD causes is an impairment in executive functioning. And that is the ability to plan and execute tasks in the most efficient order to get things done. And it's also the ability to anticipate negative consequences for potential actions that you might do and to control your impulsivity. So if you've got an unmedicated kid with this developmental disorder with ADD and you're asking them to remember to do their homework, put it in the folder, take the folder to school and give the homework to the teacher, that's not an easy ask, actually. And I don't think people really realize how just mentally exhausting and frustrating for kids this can be. And like I said, it's a neurological disorder. It's not a choice. And they used to say that about 50% of people would outgrow ADD by the time they're 27. Now they're finding that's not the case. And certainly for my adult clients, they still struggle with these issues. Trying to get their bills paid. Like they might have money, but they're getting chased by collectors because they can't remember to pay their bills. They lose things all the time. They forget appointments. They might not get things done on time at work. So it seems like for many people, it's a constant struggle. But like I said, again, these people usually get by because they are brilliant. They are the best at what they do. And so people kind of work around them.
Yeah, a lot of times I know people with ADD, they really struggle with procrastination.
Oh, yes.
And their rooms are usually a mess, or everything is disorganized. Does that sort of fall into that category of what you're saying?
It's exactly that. So procrastination is because they can't remember, they can't inhibit their brain from going off and doing something else. Writing that paper is not really interesting until you have like a deadline gun to your head and, oh crap, you better write this paper now or bad things are going to happen to you. So, and the same thing with organizing a room. That's really hard, especially for an unmedicated person. They can't even pay attention to putting away their socks long enough before they start going and straightening out something else. And then, oh my God, here's a book. I haven't seen this book in years. What's this about? And it just goes on like that. So it's very hard for them to be able to do that.
A lot of times, obviously I've worked with a lot of students with ADD just because there's a lot of people with ADD. So it's very common. And at times I have worked with parents that have absolutely refused to take medication. Like they're just, it's similar almost to what's going on with the vaccine, right? Like no way, no way, no way, no way. But I've worked with so many people that have taken medicine and it's been really a game changer.
It's life-changing.
Yeah, really a game changer. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I am a huge supporter of ADD meds. Lots of people would feel comfortable maybe having their child or themselves take an antidepressant, but actually there's a lot more research on ADD meds. We've been giving them out for over 50 years, and there's a lot of safety research on it, and particularly in children. And the good thing about an ADD med is it's off in 12 hours. You take an antidepressant, it's going to take 6 weeks to get out of your system. If you have bad side effects, they're on board with you for a while. With ADD, it's 12 hours at the max, and then it's done. So, but I think that they really can make all of this so much easier for a kid like my daughter or for Christina's son to be able to make school easier, just to make it less exhausting and more possible. And there's some research that does suggest that it's important to give children ADD medication when they're young because it kind of forces their brain to go on the functional neural pathway of paying attention and being organized, rather than kind of developing dysfunctional neural pathways. If they're kind of constantly distracted, constantly getting off task, then with the plasticity of the brain, those neural pathways are going to be emphasized. So a lot of people say you might be able to not take them later in life if you can get those neural pathways on the right path as a child and adolescent.
So this is very helpful. One question I want to ask you, and then one question I know I can chime in on a little bit, and you can probably as well. What is your advice to Christina?
Yes.
I want to ask you that, and then I do want to answer her question: where do kids like this end up as well? So I do want us to answer that maybe collectively on that. But what is your advice to Christina? Because I feel a very strong feeling. There are a lot of people listening very attentively saying, you're describing my child. I see how prevalent ADD is. And I mean, every given year, I probably work with at least 10 students that have ADD. And so, there's just a lot. And I've seen some statistics that show, I don't know, I've seen numbers like 30%. Does that sound right to you, Lisa? Is that high?
I don't know. I mean, it probably depends on certain populations. And you have to remember that ADD has really not been diagnosed very much in the past. And it's becoming more noticed now, more recognized. I suppose there might be some people who are presenting that way who maybe really don't have that problem, but I think that's the minority of people. I think most people who have ADD legitimately have ADD and are deserving of help, just like anyone else who has any other medical disorder is.
Sure. So let's circle back. What advice do you have for Christina and the other Christinas who are listening attentively?
All right. So this is what I'm thinking for Christina. I'm not sure how far along Christina's son is at this point in high school, but if he's not like in the end of his senior year, this is what I would suggest. I would suggest making sure he's on the best medication regimen for him. As I mentioned, I think medication can be a real game changer for kids with ADD. It allows them to concentrate. It allows them to focus. It allows them to maybe slow down a little bit and think about, where did I put my calculator? And all those little things that make learning, that are necessary for learning. So I would, maybe talk to your doctor, talk to a psychiatrist, really make sure you've optimized the medication regimen. There are a lot of different ones. Different people do better on one versus the other. And unfortunately, at this point, it's kind of trial and error with that. The other thing I would ask Christina to do is to make sure that her son is getting every accommodation that he needs. Does he need extra time on tests? Does he need to sit at the front of the class? I think it's hard for a kid like Christina's son because he's really smart. So he probably functions over his ADD a lot. And the school doesn't care because they say, look, he's a B, he's above average, right? But we know for this kid, that's below what his ability level is, far below. So I think that it's important to try to get accommodations. And the metaphor I would use is we don't expect someone with asthma to go without an inhaler. We wouldn't say, well, why don't you just try harder at your breathing? Just try harder.
That's a good one.
You wouldn't do that. And I really do think for testing, like the SAT and the ACT, accommodations make a huge difference. And that some high schools are accommodating and they will help and some won't. I know for my daughter, it was a battle. I had to fight. I had to threaten to get a lawyer, and they finally did give her the accommodations, but she had the same problem. Well, she has this GPA, she's way above average. It's fine, but I knew living with that kid, it was not fine. And as soon as once those accommodations went in, her grades jumped, her test performance jumped, and it was a huge difference. So you really have to advocate for your kids sometimes.
I keep thinking of great topics for you to cover. And I just thought of another one that we haven't really addressed, and I'm going to ask you to take the lead on it at some point, and that is accommodations. Like, where does somebody start? How do they do it? Where do they go? How does it work? And so we could put that in our Lisa file.
All right.
For, every 5 weeks, I'm doing bonus content, and you're doing bonus content. You're coming with some combination of college counseling combined with either mental health or psychology. And so the list of topics is growing really long, Lisa,
oh, my
for
goodness.
you.
Yeah. Well,
but that's a good one.
Spoiler alert, start as early as you possibly can. It's way better to get those accommodations in place in middle school so nobody questions it in high school, but life does not always work that way.
I have a quick story on that. So I have a student this year I'm working with, and the dad, we just got to talking, and, and it turns out that the son has some learning differences. And I brought up that, he could have gotten extra time, and when he found out, he said, extra time? Are you serious? People get extra time? What do I do to do this? And this is a senior now.
No.
I said, this is going to be a problem here, So anyway, start early. So anyway, yeah, if you can. And we'll come back with that, and I'll let you address that separately in a different segment. But I would think from everything you've said, Lisa, that you would be encouraging sort of patience and understanding when I look at your inhaler illustration, because I'm sure there's a lot of times that it's easy to get frustrated and maybe even angry with somebody who is really, it's not their fault for why some of their behaviors are the way that they are. And so I would think patience, empathy, and some of those kinds of things would sort of be implicit in your advice. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. And it's hard. I mean, having gone through it, because I would just get so frustrated with my daughter because she's so talented and she's so smart and she's like better at every single thing than I am. But I was like, why can't you just study a little harder? Why can't you just, why can't you just? And it was a process of me learning about her and me learning about ADD and me learning about myself and my own issues of like perfectionism and competitiveness and all the things that, aren't so great about me as well. So it's definitely a process, but I do think we really have to think of ADD and basically most psychiatric disorders, depression, bipolar, anxiety. At their base, they're medical problems, and we treat them like they're volitional or like they're a choice or they're not important in our society. And I think that's such a tragic mistake.
Yeah, we definitely treat somebody different who has physical ailments. We just do. I think you nailed it. Like we treat them like they're volitional, like you're making a decision to be rebellious. Friends, as I'm sure you can attest, Lisa is on fire. She was on a roll. So I called an audible just like a quarterback and decided to make this a two-parter because she was bringing the heat and I don't want to deprive you of all of her prescient insights. So we have a little tease. You have to come back next week to episode 194 to hear the conclusion of this discussion where we discuss things like what kind of colleges should Christina's son be looking at?
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, normally our interview segments are closer to 15 minutes, but this interview is going to be double that. We just let it run long, partially because our interview is our spotlight this week. There is no college spotlight, or you could say there is a college spotlight, and it is my interview with Lisa Keegan, as she really goes deep into Bucknell. And secondly, I really think this was a pretty awesome interview, and I'm convinced that Lisa's going to hold your rapt attention for 30 minutes without any boredom seeping in. Lisa kicks off our interview by giving us a 3 to 5 minute overview of who Bucknell is and what makes Bucknell special. Then Lisa talks about what she regards as Bucknell's most distinctive academic programs. She covers both those that are really well known as well as those that fly under the radar, but they're also equally exceptional. We then discuss a range of offerings that Bucknell provides, including their primate labs and their 3 different colleges within the university. We discuss double majoring at Bucknell. We then discuss Bucknell's reputation. Where's the reputation stellar and where can it be improved? Schools have personality, and Lisa describes what Bucknell's personality is for us. Then Lisa tells us who Bucknell's cross apps are. These are the schools that students who apply to Bucknell also apply to. Lisa then tells us how demonstrated interest is factored into admission decisions at Bucknell. Lisa addresses the question, are students admitted into specific colleges at Bucknell or into the university as a whole? Lisa then answers the question, how Bucknell is different from Elon. Remember, Lisa spent a sizable amount of her career at Elon, 20 plus years, counting being a student and administration and working there. Then Lisa and I discuss how the ability to pay factors into admission decisions at Bucknell. Lisa talks about some of the very rich traditions that Bucknell has. And of course, we close by me putting Lisa on the hot seat. And friends, I just want to say something. I've never said this before in an interview, but Lisa is very, very busy. She's the VP of Enrollment, meaning she's over the whole operation of the entire admission office. And if you really appreciate her interview, you should send her a short email. And her email is lak032@bucknell.edu. That's L as in lady, A as in apple, K as in kite, 032@Bucknell, BUCKNELL.edu. Listen and enjoy. Well, Lisa, we are excited to have you back to talk this time explicitly about Bucknell. And I know you do info sessions occasionally, or you get asked by students. And so this is the classic elevator pitch. Give us 3 to 4 minutes and give us an overview of Bucknell. Anything you want to share.
Happy to do that, Mark, and it's great to be back to talk about Bucknell. So Bucknell is a liberal arts university with 3,600 undergraduate students. So it's a really nice size, not too small, not too big. It's a place where you're going to continue to meet people over your 4 years here, but Definitely see some familiar faces when you're walking around campus. We're located in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, in the quintessential college town. You walk down the hill of campus and through a historic neighborhood, and you are on a really dynamic downtown street with locally owned shops and restaurants, the campus bookstore, the campus theater, which is a historic theater that we've revived, and our students can have film screenings in there, and of course shows a number of films and documentaries. So it really is that great college experience of sort of blending life on and off campus. We are a residential campus experience. Over 90% of our students live on campus in a variety of different residential environments. And we have 3 colleges: a College of Management, College of Arts and Sciences, and our College of Engineering, which you don't always find at a liberal arts college. So really diverse set of majors for students to choose between. And we have 27 Division I sports.
Wow.
You don't always find that either. And we are Division I. We're in the Patriot League. Certainly a vibrant part of campus life. And I would just say there's a vibrancy about Bucknell and Bucknell students. Our students are active, they're involved, they're doing internships. They, over half of our students study abroad. So they certainly are focused on their major, but they're really involved across campus in a number of clubs and organizations. And of course, the athletic piece as well, with about 20% of our students being student athletes.
Nice. So let's talk about some majors or programs that Bucknell is most well known for, and then some other ones that are either unique or you also know to be stellar that fly under the radar, but you think maybe they deserve more attention than maybe they get.
Yeah, we see a number of students coming to Bucknell who are really interested in some of our engineering programs, particularly biomedical engineering, mechanical engineering. Within our College of Management, finance and accounting are really popular. In the College of Arts and Sciences, economics and biology are incredibly strong and popular. And I think, students who are searching will find this, but we have a really strong animal behavior program, which you don't always find on a smaller liberal arts college campus.
I have to tell you a story. So I'm working with a student this year, and she's all about being a vet and from the Massachusetts area, and she's the one who brought to my attention how strong your program was. I was thinking,
Yes.
I think I'm supposed to be the one knowing that, but we all learn stuff from our students. She's like, I'm looking at Bucknell because of their incredible program. So that's how I first found it out from a student.
When I was touring Bucknell for the first time, I were on tour all over campus, and they said, this is our primate lab. And I'm thinking, what? Usually you see that at a large research institution. How fantastic that we offer that right here. And then I have to mention the arts and humanities. The humanities at Bucknell are incredibly interdisciplinary. And I think humanities are often areas that students find once they're here. They start to kind of realize, okay, what can I do with, religious studies? And but it's very interdisciplinary and wonderful faculty working together. And the arts, I love the arts at Bucknell because we do have arts scholarships that students can audition and apply for, but anyone can be involved in the arts here. So dance and theater and music. And you can be involved in the arts even if you have a double major. The department is incredibly open and welcoming and wants students who are interested in the arts to continue that through college, whether that's their major or not.
This is great. So you may have already touched on some of this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What would you say are the positive aspects of Bucknell's reputation? And what is something maybe that isn't as positive that you're trying to address and you'd like to see improve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, it really is about the 4-year experience and what students do here. And it is connecting that to what they want to do when they graduate. So our outcomes here are incredibly strong. But I I credit that with the undergraduate college experience and the mentorship that students have while they're here. When you're doing and performing undergraduate research, right, with a faculty mentor, that's a really powerful experience that can lead to some great outcomes for graduate school to be talking about in a job interview. And, 94% of our students 9 months out from graduation had secured postgraduate opportunities, either graduate school, or of course employment. But I credit that with what they do here. I think that level of support and commitment from the entire community while they're here leads to that success when they graduate. And one of the things that we're working on is certainly diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the reasons that I came to Bucknell is because of that commitment and seeing that commitment front and center in our strategic plan and thinking about what that means across the entire campus from every single division. I'm excited about that work. I'm excited about what it means and what kind of community we can be and will be as we continue this really important work.
Awesome. Awesome. How would you describe the personality of Bucknell? Schools have personalities. If a student said to you, "What's Bucknell's personality?" What would you say?
So I do think it is that active, vibrant campus community. I think you get a feel for that right when you step on campus, and that it's a place of ands, not ors. You don't have to come to Bucknell and be one thing. I loved, talking to one of our student ambassadors who was an engineering student, but had done 2 internships more related to business during his time here. He was a student athlete, but really loved his a cappella group. And I thought, this is what it's all about, right?
Right.
Figuring out all the different things that you love doing and how you can do them in 4 years. And I just think that's what college is all about. And I love that Bucknell provides that for students.
Great. So every school's got their overlap schools, as you know. And
Right.
when students get in their overlap schools, but they select Bucknell, what are the reasons they tell you they chose Bucknell over your overlaps? And maybe you might want to share some of your overlaps as well.
Yeah, so students applying to our College of Engineering are often looking at state institutions that also have really strong engineering programs. So, Penn State and a variety of different sort of their home state flagship that likely has really strong engineering. I think they ultimately choose Bucknell because it's hands-on day one. Smaller classes, right? Student to faculty ratio 9-to-1, and that accessibility, that ability for undergraduate research. I think that's really, really impactful and powerful, and one of the reasons. Some of our other top cross-app schools are BC, Colgate, Cornell, Lehigh, Villanova, Richmond, Wake. There's a number of institutions that have similar academic compositions that we do, and I think for a lot of students it's just individual, and sometimes they just say, I stepped foot on campus and I knew, right?
Right,
And
right.
I think it is a variety of reasons that they ultimately choose us, and it could be strength of a particular academic program. It could be the campus environment, the feel. There's a lot of influences that go into that decision.
Well, those visits are so important, as you mentioned,
Right.
Yeah, they really are. So let's get into the admission process a little bit. Talk to us about demonstrated interest, and be as honest as you can about sort of how demonstrated interest is assessed at Bucknell.
Yeah, I think for years and years, Bucknell would say, demonstrated interest didn't really play into, the admissions decision. And I think, frankly, just in our profession, demonstrated interest has evolved over time. It used to sort of be defined as visiting campus, check, or you met your admissions counselor at a college fair, check. And as we've certainly had more of an acknowledgement of barriers in doing that, whether geographic or financial barriers and traveling to campus. It's no longer, I checked the box of campus visits. So here at Bucknell, where demonstrated interest really comes into play is at waitlist time, right? When we're making those final decisions about who's going to be in the class, we want to make sure that students really, really want to be here. It doesn't hurt at all to reach out throughout the process and have a level of engagement. There are a lot of factors that are going to go into those final admissions offers. But certainly at the waitlist phase, we want to be making those final offers to students that have Bucknell at the top of their list.
So let's talk about a little bit more about sort of what makes a student stand out in the admission process. So we know every school wants a strong student academically, and they want a good kid, and they want someone that would get involved. Beyond that, what are some things that when admission officers are reading files, they really can sort of make somebody pop, someone that you could really see at Bucknell?
That often really comes through in the essay where I'll see the reader comments. It will, of course, often start with an assessment of the academic profile. And here at Bucknell, we do admit by college. So we admit you into the College of Engineering. So we are looking at that academic profile by college and a little bit differently by each college. So yeah, we want to make sure students are going to be academically successful here, but then we definitely look beyond that. And it could be a combination of different interests, right? I love the student who is applying to biomedical engineering, but also is really passionate about dance. Yes, that's a student that I know is going to thrive in a liberal arts environment. It's hard to define one specific thing. And we've worked really hard in admission to recognize that it isn't about the student that's president of 4 clubs and organization. It's about the student that really conveys an excitement, a curiosity, and something unique about themselves that we think will be great as we're really looking to put together an entire cohort, right? We want students with varied interests and experiences and backgrounds, and it's putting that all together.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. I want to follow up with what you said about admitting by college. How hard, what's the process like, and how difficult is it if somebody is admitted into, you said what, engineering, was it management, liberal arts? What were the 3 again?
Yep. We've got the College of Arts and Sciences, College of Management, and the College of Engineering.
Yes. So what's that process look like if somebody wants to internal transfer into another college? I know a lot of times it's difficult, but not impossible. Could you sort of talk about what would be involved in that?
Right. So usually once a student's enrolled at Bucknell, they'd work with their academic advisor and the associate deans within the college to make that transfer. We do right now, because of capacity limitations, we do not allow transfers into the College of Management.
Okay.
So that is the one that if students think they want to be in the College of Management at Bucknell, they need to apply during the first year application process.
Okay. Well, you're upfront about it, so that's good.
We're very transparent about that. Absolutely.
Oh, great. So I know you spent a lot of time at Elon, Lisa, quite a few years, right? Between being a student and different roles you've had. How is Bucknell different from Elon? If I'm not the first one to ask it, you're going to get asked it, so I may as well just throw it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had prospective students ask me that question, and actually worked with a prospective student this year that met me at Elon and then was going through Bucknell's application process as well. And so it's been sort of an interesting year in that as well. Probably the biggest differences are the size and the academic composition. Elon has over 6,000 students now, so definitely more of a mid-sized institution, where Bucknell has not been in growth mode and, has had about a little over, between 3,300 and 3,600 undergraduate students. And Elon has somewhat similar academic composition, but it has a school of communications, and that's a pretty hot school for Elon. So certainly some different academic offerings, and it also has graduate school at Elon. We do have a handful of graduate students here at Bucknell, but Elon has, I think now, 7 or 8 different graduate programs. It has a college of law. So just, academically, certainly different. I won't go into the weather. That's obvious difference. North Carolina, Pennsylvania.
You're talking about somebody who moved from Pennsylvania, where I lived from 95 to 09 to Georgia. So, and both my kids went to college in North Carolina, so I know those differences.
Absolutely. I'm finally adapted to winter. Now, I'll say winter it was great here in Pennsylvania. It was a lot of fun, and it was better than I anticipated after living in the South for so long.
Well, you have Ohio roots, so
that's exactly
back there, right?
Yeah, right in the snow belt of Ohio. Lewisburg, Pennsylvania is not that, so it's very manageable. One of the things I'll just say, Mark, that's really similar in those institutions is the student-centered nature, and that's one of the reasons that coming to Bucknell was so attractive. It's mission centric, it's student centered, and a place like Elon offers that as well. So certainly some nice similarities too.
Great.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, you get 2 recommended resources from me this week. Our regular listeners know that around last year this time, my recommended resource was the FAFSA walkthrough video. And you can go back and find that under yourcollegeboundkid.com resources, episode 141 under the website tab. However, there's always some changes. And so one of the recommended resources is the updated version, the 2022-23 FAFSA walkthrough video. And this is produced by Utah College Awareness and Financial Aid. They do the best one I know. It's current, it's updated. We'll put the link in the show notes. But if you forget this, you could also just go to YouTube and put in 2022-23 FAFSA walkthrough video, and it'll pop right up. I like the one that's produced by Utah College Awareness and Financial Aid. And friends, I do recommend, even if you do not qualify for financial aid, I recommend that you complete the FAFSA for a couple of reasons. One, there are about 30 colleges that will only give merit-based aid. Merit-based, not need-based. That doesn't matter what your income is, right? Jeff Bezos could get money. Not Bezos, but his kid. If you complete the FAFSA. And so one, it can make you eligible for merit-based aid. And new schools are adding all the time to that list, so it's very difficult to keep up with it. It changes a lot, so the safest way is just to complete the FAFSA. And I also do believe that students should have some skin in the game. And so your child can take out a small, modest loan through the Federal Direct Student Loan Program, like $2,000 a year, or it can be more, but it just depends on you. And there's research that shows that when students have some skin in the game, they graduate at a higher rate. And by the way, if you start making payments, or not you, but they start making payments while your child is in college, then you will be building up their credit score as well. So that's the first recommended resource. And the second one, and this is one I promised Lisa Keegan when we recorded our interview. I promised I would tell everybody about the fantastic podcast that her admission office produces. So it's called College Admission Insider. And they're up to 25 episodes now. They don't have an episode every week, but they're religious at having one every other week. And they're really, really good. I listen to myself. I find I learn something every time. The episodes are around 20 minutes, 25 sometimes. And I'll just share with you some of the most recent topics they've had. So the most recent episode looks at preparing for your first semester in college. The one before that looks at advice and support for first-gen students and their families. 23 says location, urban or rural, in-state or out-of-state. That was a good one. 22, public or private, what's the difference? That was a good one. And I really like this one. 21, a deep dive into GPA calculation. That was episode 21. And then the one before that, academic rigor, which high school classes should I choose? That was also really good. So, and even the one before that says planning a college road trip advice. So those are the last 7 episodes going back to June. It's called the College Admission Insider. And I don't recommend things that I don't believe will help people. And some people say, why are you telling people about the competition? That's not how I feel, particularly when it's a not-for-profit. But if it can help you, then I want to get it out there. So strongly recommend the College Admission Insider podcast produced by Bucknell University. And those are our 2 recommended resources for episode 193. We now will return to my interview with, guess who? Lisa Keegan, as she talks about Bucknell University. Let's talk about need aware, because I know Bucknell is need aware, and I know that can be confusing to people. Talk about what does that mean at Bucknell, and how can a student that doesn't pay full freight feel like they're sort of being read and decisioned by your admissions committee?
Yeah, when students are being read and decisions are being recommended for them, readers have no financial information on them. I think that's really, really critical to just help define what need aware is in general. So very few institutions are completely need blind, meaning that they have the resources that they can admit whomever they'd like from their applicant pool, and they make a commitment to meet 100% demonstrated financial need for those students. At the other end of the spectrum, you have schools that don't have the ability to meet 100% demonstrated financial need and might do what they call gapping significantly, right? They're just not able to meet, maybe meet 50 or 60% of a family's need. And then you have more places like a Bucknell that offer generous financial aid packages. And it's only at the point where we're about to release those admissions decisions that we're making sure that we're staying within our allocated resources. We want students of various socioeconomic levels. We also want to make sure that we can package students to the best of our ability to make Bucknell accessible for them. So I think it's really important that students use resources, net price calculators. There are some other easier tools out there that schools have available on their websites that you can just pop in basic financial information and get an idea of what your financial package might be at Bucknell. But I think the most important part is that students realize there are a lot of attributes and being taken into consideration when we're making our offers of admission, and standing out, that academic profile, that great college essay, recognizing that you will contribute in X ways to our campus is the most important part.
Yeah, and Lisa and I know that there's not that many schools that are completely need blind and meet full need, and the list is most likely shorter than what you see if you do a Google search, right? There are still some schools that want to claim to be need blind and meet full need that every few years, a few of them admit, okay, we really aren't, and we need to do full truth in advertising, and no, we're not completely need blind. And so most people in higher ed think that list may even be, one hand, if that, in reality.
That's exactly right. And I do think schools are doing a better job. And, here at Bucknell, we'll put out, on our website, how many students are on financial aid, what is the average package. But again, using those other resources like a net price calculator will give families a more accurate view of what an institution would cost to them, because it just varies so much based on a family's circumstances. I definitely think in the college search process, don't rule out a school just because of its sticker price. Dig a little bit deeper, and always feel free to have those questions answered by admissions counselors, by financial aid counselors. That this process goes hand in hand, and we're having that conversation here at Bucknell amongst my team quite a bit. The financial aid piece has to be part of the admissions piece. And we've been taught, well, we're not in the same building. And that's one of the things I've been saying. I want financial aid to be in the admissions building, right? Because I want prospective students and families to know that is part of this process. We expect that to be part of the process, right? And we want to keep Bucknell, certainly on their lists.
Yeah. So Lisa, we're getting ready to wind down now. Is there anything about Bucknell that you'd like to share we haven't discussed so far?
I'd love to share a little bit about our traditions. One of the things that I love about Bucknell is just the rich sense of history and traditions that have lasted over time and are really meaningful to students. and sort of that connection to the 4 years that they'll spend here. So when students arrive on campus, they have a robust orientation program. But before they start classes as first-year students, they have a ceremony that really marks that. And they enter and walk through our iconic gates on our campus, the Christy Mathewson gates. And the faculty are there and, welcoming them. And it really signals beginning your Bucknell journey. And then when students graduate, they're in their cap and gowns, they exit those gates as we're sending them out in the world as Bucknellians. I just love that tradition. I think it speaks so much to the community here. The other thing I'll just note is, Bucknell it's steeped in really rich history. You get that sense on campus. It's just this beautiful, iconic college campus, brick buildings. And then we have our infamous blue and orange. Those are our school colors. We're the bison. Blue and orange Adirondack chairs all over campus. And I love that because it's really subtle, but it sends a message about school spirit. It sends a message about community. We want you to be out and engaging with others. And actually, those were really critical in the pandemic when people would meet outdoors. I love that we added more on campus. But it kind of, just signals this, again, kind of historic traditional campus with some whimsy and energy and fun, which I think college should be about as well.
I remember a few years ago when you guys went to the Sweet 16 and that blue and orange was everywhere. You could really just sense the zeal and enthusiasm the students had. It was pretty fun to watch.
So when I was transitioning from my previous institution, that's one of the things you think about, right? The school colors and how much you have of it. So my family and I have fully embraced the blue and orange. We love it. It's great.
Great. Well, Lisa, no first-time guest gets away without going on the hot seat. So it's our lightning round. So you're ready?
I'm ready.
All right. What's your favorite sport to watch?
Oh, I will watch any sport in the college campus where I am. Definitely college athletics fans for sure.
Great. Well, we'll let you get away with that. Favorite TV show?
Oh, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Oh, you had one for me. Good.
Yeah.
I haven't even seen that. What is that? Is that Netflix?
The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I think it is on Netflix. It's been, it's one of those you binge watch and you're sort of waiting for the next season, but it's quirky and lighthearted. And at the end of a long working day, what you need. So
there you go. There you go.
That one I'm waiting for them to drop the next season.
This one is your guilty pleasure food that you shouldn't eat because it's not healthy, but you can't resist.
So I do think there's some health aspects to dark chocolate, but it's probably not healthy in the amount that I eat it in.
No
and
bribing
anyone
you
who
with dark
knows me
chocolate
knows you can open my desk drawer and find a bag of dark chocolate.
There you go. There you go.
It's just about not eating the entire bag at once.
There you go. And no attempts to bribe you for admission by sending dark chocolate.
That's right.
But once you're in and you're settled, you can.
I welcome the dark chocolate. I'm not picky on the brand. I eat it all.
Great. Someone's in Lewiston. What restaurant do you recommend they attend?
Oh, in Lewisburg, I would say Graham's Eatery for sure. It has great food. And then just sort of outside of town, we have a great little find that a lot of, I do see Bucknell students at all the time. It's called Ard's Farm, and it's farm to table. It's excellent.
Great.
We have really good food here.
Kids like that. Food's important.
Really good food here in Lewisburg, yes.
And the book you've read that's impacted you the most in the last few years?
I will say I was a little bit late to the game in reading it. I'm one of those people who I love reading and I buy books and then they're, sort of stacked up. So it was actually, relatively recently I read Just Mercy, and it's one that you still just, it was so powerful, such a good book, such incredible insight into that world. It was really good, really Fabulous.
that's a good
I've
one.
not watched the movie yet, but I know there is one.
I've seen the movie, but haven't read the book. And
Oh, the
so
book
my
was so
daughter
good.
made me watch the movie with her one day, and I was glad I did. She drove me in. It was very, very powerful, and tears were rolling
Very
down her cheek.
powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I also say I read a lot of I read a lot of fiction, and I can read a book in a day, and I often won't even remember the name of the title. So I
You have
love
great
to
books, but you don't
read.
know the titles.
I love to read. Yeah. But I mean, no, the ones that are the most impactful, you remember. So Just Mercy for sure.
Yeah, that's I can see why.
It was a good one.
So here we go. Advice for parents and advice for students.
My advice to students is to do some self-reflection in this process and really stay true to what matters to you. And that means defining what matters to you. I think that's really important. My advice to parents, I am borrowing this as well, but this is your time to be the coach and the supporter and, start to kind of keep taking a step back as you let your students' decision-making process unfold. And I think that can be challenging for parents. I get it. I'm a mom. We want the very best for our students. And every decision that we make is about getting our students to this point, right? Going to college.
Right.
But I think it is taking that deep breath and thinking about how you can support them rather than managing the entire process for them.
I love how you took us full circle. So your advice for students about self-reflection is where we started, last episode on fit. You took us all the way full circle. That's like what students do in their essays sometimes.
I know. I just think it's so important, and as you and I talked about the rankings and the selectivity and, there's just so much coming at students. There's so much written about the college admission process. There's various takes on it and what people see in the news. It's stressful. And I do think, it's incumbent upon us as a profession, as leaders in this work to think about how to alleviate a little bit of that. And I think the students can cut through some of that noise and think about what matters most to them. They're going to be okay. And, mom, dad, friend, supporter, and this advocate in this college search process is going to feel really good about that as well. Move-in day will be a happy day wherever it may be.
Day.
That's my
love
other piece
day.
of advice. Move-in day will be a happy day wherever it might be.
Awesome. Lisa, thank you so much. You've been most generous with your time. I know as a VP of Enrollment, you got a million people tugging at you in a lot of different directions. Can you close us out by sharing Bucknell's website and maybe anywhere, like what social media you'd recommend students check out in addition to the website?
Yeah, so, bucknell.edu, you can find a number of resources available to you. There are a number of student stories, faculty stories, a number of ways to get to know us. We do have a new virtual reality experience. It's not a VR, it's not a virtual tour of campus. It's an actual experience that you can do, via web, and or your phone. And then we have an Instagram account called Ray Bucknell. It's short for Hooray Bucknell, but we sort of take it on as a persona. Who is Ray Bucknell? And it's our student-led Instagram account. So you can get a first account of what students are doing.
And for anyone who's not sure, that's Bucknell with 2 L's.
That's right.
Bucknell.
Thanks for that, Mark.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Let's keep in touch.
This was great. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure.
Take care.
Next week in the news, the truth about college admissions from College Admission Deans, an article by Valerie Strauss of the Washington Post. Next week is going to be part 2 of Lisa telling us that where do bright kids with ADD and a possible B average end up? Our interview is with Michael Thong, the founder of the Student Manager podcast, and that will be part 1 of 2. And our college spotlight has the debut of our newest team member, Sylvia Borgo, and she will
Yay.
what's that?
I just said yay.
Yay! Sorry. Who will be talking about UC San Diego.
You're not going to want to miss that, friends. And we've got a new term in our podcast lexicon, Dave.
What's that?
You know what it is?
Nope.
It is hammer toe.
Oh, yeah, that's right, man. When I get mad at you, I'm going to say, don't bring that hammer toe to the discussion.
And I'll be all right, BIPOC.
All right.
Have a good week, my friend.
No problem. Stay away from them hammer toes.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. David Williams and Dr. Lisa Rouff. Our sound engineer who fixes all of our many errors is Nemanja Modfitch. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Dalianas Dimitri. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.